This live stream was supposed to capture a regular church evening service, but instead, it recorded one of the most terrifying moments in the history of Eruku town in Kwara State, Nigeria. On the evening of Tuesday, November 18, 2025, worshippers gathered at the Christ Apostolic Church in Eruku town, Ekiti local government area of Kwara State. It was a regular midweek service, the kind held in churches across Nigeria every week. Families came together to pray, sing, and worship. Children sat beside their parents. Elderly women also sat on the wooden benches, and the pastor stood at the front, leading the congregation in prayer. Nobody expected that within minutes, their peaceful gathering would turn into a scene of devastating horror. The attack began suddenly. Armed men stormed into the church compound with their heavy weapons clearly visible for everyone to see. They began brandishing their weapons, and the sounds of their heavy gunfire shattered the calmness of that evening service and sent the worshippers into a sudden state of panic. What made this attack different from the numerous others was the fact that it was being captured on camera. The church had been live streaming the service, and the footage would later reveal the full terror of what happened that evening. In the video that circulated afterward, viewers could see the moment chaos erupted within the church. The gunmen entered the church building, brandishing their weapons with confidence. They were not hiding, and they were certainly not afraid of facing any form of resistance. They walked into the place as if they owned it, knowing that the frightened worshippers had absolutely no way to defend themselves. The video showed elderly women scrambling desperately to find cover. Some tried to hide under the church tables, while others pressed themselves against the walls, hoping that the gunmen would not see them. The children could be heard crying out in fear, but their small voices were lost in the confusion and the deafening sound of gunshots. Some worshippers attempted to run toward the exit, but the attackers had blocked their escape routes. After firing several shots that left 3 worshippers dead on the floor, the terrorists began gathering the surviving congregation members at gunpoint. They forced the frightened people to their feet. Men, women, children, and reportedly even the pastor were rounded up like cattle. The gunmen marched their captives out of the church and into the surrounding bush. The worshippers, still in their church clothes, were led along bush paths that connected Eruku to neighboring communities. They disappeared into the forest, and their fate has remained unknown till now. Nobody knew the exact number of people who had been taken, since it was impossible to count who was missing and who had escaped. By the time the shooting stopped, 3 people lay dead inside and around the church. One victim, identified as Mr. Aderemi, was found fatally shot inside the Christ Apostolic Church building itself. Another victim, Mr. Tunde Ajayi, was discovered in the bush, also killed by gunfire. A member of the local vigilante group, Shegun Alaja, was also shot and injured. He was rushed to a local hospital in Eruku for emergency treatment. The police responded to the sound of gunfire, arriving with members of the local vigilante team. But by the time they reached the scene, the attackers had already fled into the bush with their captives. The terrorists seemed to have known the area very well. They used the dense forest and hidden paths to escape, making it nearly impossible for security forces to track them in the darkness. The attack left the community in shock and grief. Residents who heard the gunshots fled into nearby bushes for safety, afraid that the terrorists might return. Many people abandoned their homes that night since they were too terrified to stay. This was not the first time Eruku had experienced such violence. Community members told reporters that they had been under repeated attacks in recent times. The police, vigilantes, and the Eruku Progressive Union had mounted resistance in recent weeks, trying to protect the town. But the renewed assault showed that the threat was far from over. The terrorists were becoming bolder, now targeting places of worship where people gathered in large numbers. The Kwara State Police Public Relations Officer confirmed the incident. She described it as an attempted bandit attack, praising the swift response of the police and vigilantes. The Commissioner of Police, CP Adekimi Ojo, assured the public that security agencies would not relent until the attackers were completely defeated. But for the families of the dead and the abducted, these assurances offered very little comfort. The attack on the Christ Apostolic Church in Eruku was not the first time terrorists had targeted a church in Nigeria. In fact, it reminded us of an even more devastating massacre that had occurred 3 years earlier. On June 5, 2022, gunmen carried out one of the deadliest church attacks in Nigerian history at St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church in Owo, Ondo State. That attack happened on a Sunday morning during Pentecost celebration, which was one of the most important days in the Christian calendar. The church was packed with worshippers attending mass when the terrorists struck. The Owo attack was more coordinated and far more deadly than what happened in Eruku. The gunmen arrived disguised as regular churchgoers, carrying bags that contained their deadly firearms. They positioned themselves both inside and outside the church building. Some took seats among the congregation, while others waited outside, blocking the exit. At around 11:30 in the morning, just as the service was about to end, and the priest had even asked people to start leaving the church, the attack began. Explosive devices were detonated outside the church. Then both groups of attackers opened fire simultaneously. Those outside shot directly into the church through the windows and doors. Those who dressed as worshippers fired from inside, creating a deadly crossfire that gave worshippers nowhere to run to. The main entrance to the church was locked, trapping people inside. The gunmen shot at anyone who moved. They killed a young boy who was selling candy at the entrance. They fired on people trying to make their way to the two open doors. Even passers-by on the street were struck by bullets. The massacre lasted for several minutes, though it must have felt like hours to those trapped within the church building. Video footage from inside the church after the attack showed a scene that was too gruesome to describe. A priest who survived described hiding inside the church for 20 minutes with other survivors too afraid to move until they were sure that the attackers had left. Another priest, Father Andrew Abayomi, shielded children and adults who clung to him, protecting them like a mother hen protects her chicks. The death toll from the Owo massacre was staggering. Initially, officials reported at least 22 dead bodies in the local hospital mortuary, including 2 children. But many families had taken their dead loved ones for private burial at home, meaning that the actual number was much higher. The government later revised the death toll to at least 40, with 61 injured survivors still in the hospital. Witnesses and local politicians estimated that the real number of dead was over 50, possibly as high as 70 to 100 people. At least 5 children were confirmed dead, while 2 police officers also lost their lives. The Owo attack was a mass casualty incident that overwhelmed local hospitals. Doctors told reporters that they were struggling to treat the dozens of wounded victims who flooded in all at once. The entire town went into mourning. Families lost multiple members, children were orphaned, and the community was traumatized. Comparing the 2 attacks showed both similarities and differences. Both targeted churches during active worship services. Both involved armed terrorists who showed no mercy. Both left communities devastated and feeling very afraid. However, the Owo attack was more coordinated, involved more attackers, used explosives in addition to firearms, and ultimately resulted in a much higher death toll. The Eruku attack, while smaller in scale, added the element of mass abduction by taking captives into the forest. What makes these attacks so terrifying is that they target the one place where people should feel safest. Churches, mosques, and other places of worship are meant to be sanctuaries. They are meant to be peaceful spaces where communities gather. When terrorists attack these places, they are not just killing individuals, they are attacking the very heart of communities. They are spreading fear that makes people afraid to practice their faith openly. As of now, there has been no significant update on the case. The fate of those abducted remains unclear. The terrorists have not been caught. The community continues to live in fear, wondering if the attackers will return. What are your thoughts on this incident? Share your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more true crime stories. Thank you for watching and stay safe.